All right, hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. I'm Thomas. I do educational videos, and we are working on getting through this talk given by Dewey B. Larson back in 1986. And Larson is the guy who originated the reciprocal system of theory. And this is a theory of everything that he came up with in the middle part of the 20th century. He died back in 1990. And hardly anybody has ever heard of this, but I think it's a very interesting theory that has a lot of ramifications. And the theory has been moved forward by Dr. Bruce Perrett, Dr. KVK Nehru, and Dr. Gopi Krishna, as well as others. Um, and they've made some great progress with it. So the basic idea is that the universe is not made out of matter, it's not made out of energy, but it's made out of motion. Motion is the relationship between space and time. And space and time are identical, except that they are reciprocals of each other. And so any type of fraction that you have between space and time, space over time, or space squared over time, or space over time squared, or anything up to, well, it could be even beyond 3 dimensions, uh, is a scientific phenomena. So some type of unit, scientific unit. So, for example, time to the third power over space to the third power is matter. Anyway, time and space are reciprocals of each other, and they are identical to each other in terms of their qualities. The quality that we know best about space is that it's three-dimensional or multidimensional, and so time is also multidimensional. What we know about time is that it's always progressing. Things are always getting later and later and later. And so too, space has that property. Things are always getting farther and farther and farther apart. Okay, so that's the 1 minute version of that reciprocal system, just enough so that we can get in. Now, what we're looking at is Larson starts with that original beginning, and then he builds his theoretical universe step by step from that initial postulate. And he has another postulate, but that's in dispute, and I don't think it's necessary to get into it quite yet. So we are way down the track, though, on this. This is the 11th video that I've done on this. So we're all the way up to number 107, statement number 107. So you're kind of jumping in right in the middle here. And you might want to go back and start. This talk is called The Outline of the Deductive Development of the Reciprocal System. So you might want to go to letter A on that. I think this is letter K or possibly even L. I think it is L. Okay, so number 107. From statement 33, the scalar motion that constitutes the atom of matter is three-dimensional and inward. The one-dimensional outward movement of electrons, or units of space, through matter or through a gravitational field, therefore neutralizes a portion of the gravitational motion and leaves a scalar motion remnant in 2 dimensions. The physical effects of this residual motion are known as electromagnetism. As would be expected, they are similar to those of gravitation, except for the differences introduced by the 2-dimensionality. Now, just recall that Larson makes a distinction between spatial dimensions and scalar dimensions. One scalar dimension, now just remember, scalar motion is a motion that has no direction or all directions. no preferred direction, and but it just has magnitude. So it's kind of like any type of unit that doesn't have uh, any type of measurement that doesn't have a unit. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, no direction. And a scalar, a three-dimensional system, with x, y, and z coordinates, they can all be fit into one scalar dimension. So one scalar dimension spans three vectorial dimensions. And so whenever he's talking about his form of motion, the universe is made out of motion, is a scalar motion. And a lot of his measurements are in scalar motion or scalar dimensions. The other two dimensions of a scalar system are not things that we cannot directly perceive. We only really can perceive one scalar dimension at a time in its full resolution. Otherwise, we're really just looking at kind of the surface of things. Okay, number 108. The residual motion in two dimensions is perpendicular to the dimension of the motion that is neutralized, that is perpendicular to the electric current. This provides the explanation of the unique direction of electromagnetism that has heretofore been an unexplained anomaly. Number 109, as the residue of the inward gravitational motion, the electromagnetic motion is necessarily inward. However, the orientation of the scalar direction inward with respect to the spatial reference system is reversed when the direction of the current is reversed. Conductors carrying current in the same direction move toward each other, while conductors carrying currents in opposite directions move away from each other. Okay, number 110. There is no two-dimensional analog of the electric current because the material system contains no negative magnetic particle. But the equivalent of a magnetic current, a two-dimensional motion through matter, can be produced by various means, such as mechanical movement of a conductor in a magnetic field. This two-dimensional motion neutralizes a portion of the three-dimensional motion of the matter and leaves a one-dimensional residue. If a conductor is appropriately located, this residue manifests itself as electric current. The process of producing a current by this means is known as electromagnetic induction. Number 111. As noted in statement 1, motion in general is measured in terms of speed. When represented in a spatial reference system, the motion acquires a direction, and speed becomes velocity. The introduction of direction or directions does not affect the dimensional relations. All of the previous dimensional conclusions stated in terms of speed are equally valid in terms of velocity. Number 112. From number 111 and 96, the product of mass and velocity, momentum, has the dimensions of t, time to the second power over space to the second power. This quantity was formerly called quantity of motion, an expression which more clearly indicates its nature. It is actually a measure of the total amount of the mass, which consists of n mass units, each having the quantity of motion measured by the velocity. The time rate of change of velocity is acceleration. the time rate of change of the product of mass and velocity, the quantity of motion, is force. Thus, force is, by definition, the same kind of a property of motion as acceleration. We would appropriately call it quantity of acceleration. Number 113. Since force is, by definition, from the previous, a property of motion, it follows that a force cannot be autonomous. The so-called fundamental forces of nature are necessarily properties of fundamental motions. Number 114. The same considerations apply to the electrostatic force, which, from number 112, must also be the force aspect of an electric motion. For an understanding of this motion, we return to the question as to the types of scalar motion that can exist in the theoretical universe. Thus far, we have encountered three general types: unidirectional motion, vibrational motion, which is linear motion with a continuous change from inward to outward, and vice versa. And then scalar rotation, which is a uniform, rotationally distributed scalar motion. Obviously, there is a fourth possibility, a scalar rotational vibration. That is a rotationally distributed scalar motion with a continuous change from inward to outward and vice versa, a rotational simple harmonic motion. Okay, now Perret has a footnote here, and he says a common mechanical analogy would be the back and forth rotational motion of an agitator in a washing machine. So you know the agitator of the washing machine goes like this. And that's a rotational, that is a rotational vibration. Okay, he calls it a rotational simple harmonic motion. Number 115, an independent rotational vibration cannot exist, as there would be nothing to confine the progression to the rotational path, and it would revert to the more probable linear status. But a unit of rotational vibration can be combined with a unit of rotation. The inward phase of the rotational vibration is coincident with the corresponding rotation and has no physical effect. The outward phase is an effective rotationally distributed scalar motion opposing the atomic rotation in the dimension or dimensions of the rotational vibration. It thus conforms to the requirement for stability as expressed in statement 58. Number 116, from statement 57, the rotational vibration must not be of the same general nature as the rotation to which it is applied. The effect of this restriction is to bar three-dimensional rotational vibration. The added rotational vibrations may be either one-dimensional or two-dimensional. Number 117, we identify a rotational vibration as a charge and a one-dimensional charge as an electric charge. Inability to identify any motion connected with the electric charge is one of the reasons why the theorists have accepted the force exerted by the charge as fundamental, even though this conflicts with the definition of force as noted in statement 112. The explanation, as indicated above, is that the charge itself is the motion. Okay, so he's making a distinction between the electron, which is an electric current, and the electric charge. The electric current is uncharged. So the electric current is the electron is a rotating unit of space. The electric charge is a reversal of that rotation of space. From number 118, from 115, the charge must have a carrier, an atom or particle. Independent charges do not exist. Okay, so that charge, that vibration cannot come into being by itself. It has to have a carrier, an electron, or it could be an atom. Number 119. From 117, the space-time dimensions of the electric charge are T over S. That is, the charge is dimensionally equivalent to energy. This equivalence is demonstrated by the fact that charge and kinetic energy are interconvertible. Number 120. The electric charges may be either positive or negative, but the total displacement is smaller and therefore more probable if the displacement of the charge is opposite to that of the rotation. Consequently, a positive rotation takes a negative charge, and vice versa. But in current practice, the rotational combinations are designed as positive or electropositive if they normally take positive electric charges, and negative or electronegative if they normally take negative charges. It is not feasible to try to change this firmly established practice, so the usual terminology will be applied in the statements that follow, with the understanding that the significance appertaining to the terms positive and negative elsewhere in this outline is reversed in application to electric charge. Just making his terminology even more cumbersome than it was before. But again, it's like he's correcting a scientific legacy science mistake, and he's paying for it because they calculated it wrong, and he's correcting it, but there's this inertia that's involved in establishing practices, historical inertia that he can't really overcome because everybody has used this terminology in the past. He can't just snap his fingers and switch it. He could, but he doesn't try to. Number 121, from 26, statement 26, we find that in order to represent a scalar motion in a fixed spatial reference system, it is necessary to identify a reference point. Number 122, the motion of a positive charge, a high-speed rotational vibration, is outward from a negative reference point toward more positive values, including the positive reference points. That of a negative charge, a low-speed rotational vibration, is outward from a positive reference point toward more negative values, including the negative reference points. The reference system cannot distinguish between positive and negative reference points. This is another of the deficiencies of the conventional spatial reference system. Number 123, from 122, two positive charges move outward from the same reference point and therefore outward from each other. Two negative charges do likewise, but a positive charge moves outward from a negative reference point toward all positive reference points, including the reference point of the negative charge, and therefore toward the negative charge. Thus, like charges repel each other, while unlike charges attract. Okay, we're going to stop there. Now, again, just don't get discouraged by this. It's pretty abstract and hard to follow, and you got to listen to Larson in super, super slow motion before you can get him, because he's always putting in these parenthetical phrases and these prepositional phrases, and, using words that are, fairly difficult to follow as well. But he's just building up this system. So this is a reference for you for later, more or less. I'm just going through so that you can get a sense of how he thinks and how the development goes. We will be applying this to more concrete things in more specific ways coming up very soon. Okay, so just stick with it. I want to get this all kind of in the bank so that you can refer to it at a later time, so that when you're asked, when you're saying, where did Larson get that from, you can actually go back to this and find where he got it from. Okay, have a great day. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.